Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF Everything in That Shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF Everything. Spoiled Rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And it's Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf. Yeah.
Woo! Yeah, boom.
did it.
This is Moon Knight, episode 2. Summon the suit.
Yes,
Steven.
sir.
Just do it, Steven. Summon
Steven
it.
with a V.
Yeah, not PH.
it's
not
it's
PH.
oh god. Let's do it's with a V. Yeah, this episode definitely got me going a lot more, but it makes me feel still like badly for Steven, obviously.
Mm. Oh well, definitely by the end of it, you
Mhm.
can't help but feel bad for him. But
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
I
if you
do
didn't
like-
already feel bad for him throughout,
Mhm.
it's okay. Well,
Yeah. But I
That
mean,
was
he gets
the
to have a
end.
little bit of fun, and I can't wait to talk about that.
yeah.
But yeah, let's get there.
So Steven, well, we open on the audio from the last episode, the Moon Knight beating up the Jackal, but
Yep.
the visual is Steven waking up, and it's that shot from the trailer where he tries to get out of bed and gets yanked down.
The run fall, very, very rough.
Yes, very rough. And
And it's important to know that he's chained up here. It's really important.
obviously he's
just
been chained back.
Fantastic. Mhm.
And he's trying to talk to Mark in the mirror, but
Mhm.
nothing's happening. So then he goes back to work,
Mhm.
and he speaks with the security guard, who I guess is called JB. I never knew that, but
Mm.
JB, the security guard. And you might have more insight into this. Is he the one that initiates, like, hey, let's look at the security footage, or was JB always about to just do that and he was like, oh yeah, let's look at it together?
Well, what I remember was Stephen with a V saying, like, have you seen the footage yet? He's like,
Mhm.
no, I was just about to, and then they just check
Okay,
it
it
out
was just
together.
about to- all right,
Yeah.
okay, so then they go, and it's a nice bit of comedy here where he's like setting it up. He's like, this is
Mhm.
like Area 51, like this is gonna blow your mind, are you ready for this?
Mhm.
And it's just him cowering, and I'm not even making fun of him. Like, obviously if a demon is chasing you, you're not
Mhm.
gonna look great if it's just you standing there,
Mhm.
and the other people can't see the demon.
Mhm.
And I do like his delivery when JB was like, are you crying? And he's like, a bit, yeah. He's like,
Yeah,
there's no real shame, and he's like, a bit, yeah, I am.
absolutely.
Yeah.
He's going through some hard times. I mean, everyone should be able to cry, right?
I really liked his delivery of that. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of this gut punch moment of,
Mhm.
oh man, like it just looks like he is out of his mind. It doesn't, it's not showing the full story here.
Yeah.
So that's a bummer. But what ends up happening is, after all that comedy, there's this very interesting moment where Mark comes back from the bathroom where all the
Mhm.
destruction is done, or most of the destruction is done,
Mhm.
and just looks into the camera, with Steven being able to recognize, like,
Mhm.
that's not me. Like,
That's not me, yeah.
For what I like about that is the show, and as we talked about the comics, a lot of it is the protagonists. You want to call him Mark, you want to call him Steven, you want to call him Jake. They as a protagonist, he doesn't know if things are actually happening, and so it's nice for him to be able to call out, like, that isn't me, I'm not confused about that.
Yeah.
I would never have that look in my eyes.
Yeah,
That's
because
not
it's really interesting for you to say that, because, like, for him, losing his grip on reality all the time, like wondering if things are dreams and constantly waking up in different places, he has to have some level of, I'm not completely gone. Like, I have to have some grounded level. Like when he was like with the fish, it's like, yesterday I had one fin, now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
2 fins. Like, he
Thus,
knows
yeah.
things that are grounded in reality, but he can't fill in the gaps, which is so crazy when Mark takes over or when Khonshu takes over, right? So you really feel bad for him there, really and truly. Or at least I did.
Yeah, it's just this moment of like, oh, like, yeah, that's not me, and no
Mhm.
one's gonna believe that's not me. And then
Yeah,
you cut to
HR,
HR letting him go. But I mean, they try to offer some help.
which
Um,
is nice.
I
Like
wonder though if
genuinely.
that was not someone who's like part of, the following for Amit, but
Oh, I
they didn't.
definitely believe is on that
Okay,
following. I
okay. So
definitely
then,
believe
yeah.
it.
But yeah, he gets the information. They're like,
Mhm.
this is gonna help you, and he's kind of thinking like, oh, great, like, so you're not firing me. And they're like, oh no, like you are, we are letting you go, but
Mhm.
um, here's something we can offer you for you to get
Mhm.
help.
Mhm.
Um, as you said, that is very nice. I know he doesn't take the help, but it was just like the bummer is it was probably always just a way to get him in the room with Harrow. But in,
Probably.
in theory, it is a good idea to help
Yep.
people.
Mhm.
When you see something like that, instead of just being like you're a menace, like to actually be like, well, okay,
Yeah.
like you're obviously going through something. You're not like it's not appropriate for you to still be working here, but
Mhm.
we would like for you to get some help.
Yeah, and it's one thing when someone's like, no, that wasn't me at all. And he's just like, wait, that's not me. I don't recognize that person. But
Mhm.
he's still like heavily, no, I'm sitting in this HR thing. I'm not yelling at anyone. I'm
No,
not being angry. He's being very appropriately like, I don't even know what's going on.
yeah, and that's the next scene as well. Not, I'm sorry, I'm saying in addition to what you just said, which is right, the next scene kind of seals the deal on that when he says, I don't even blame them for letting me go, like that's not
Yes.
the issue, I just need
Mhm.
to figure out what's happening here.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize this, but in the credits the gold statue man is listed as Crawley, who is a
Mhm.
big part, I'm sure, of other runs, but the run I read by Lemire, Crawley is a big, um he has a big role in it. He
Mm,
speaks in it, but he has a big role.
mm.
So I thought that was interesting that that's how they're weaving in Crawley as
Yeah.
like his kind of silent confidant.
The gold painted dude who did give a little, he broke character a little bit with
Oh yeah,
Hug.
oh yeah. I was gonna get to that, which I
Yeah.
thought was interesting because I couldn't read what that meant other than he was breaking character once it stopped being talking and obviously more when he gets the hug. Like that
Yeah.
was a bigger investment in them than just talking at him.
Absolutely. It was just one of those situations where I couldn't tell if that look, because this is the first thing that ran through my mind, was that look from Crowley to Stephen at that point. Do you think it's like it's Crowley being like, it's finally time that you reached out and like try to hold someone, right? Like to connect with someone, because I feel so bad for him. Like you get the same bit in episode 1 where he's like, okay, he the Stephen Mark situation that he goes on with the Swiss Alps basically ditches that date, right? And then he's like, yeah, well, why would anyone date me? He accepts that. He's like, yeah, I understand. The same thing with the HR thing. So it's really, really rough to see these things going like, yeah, I completely understand why I can't have a normal life at all.
Mhm.
And it's just so hard to see. So hard.
It's a rough one for Steven, even though he makes a lot of jokes throughout the episode.
Yeah. But
Uh,
to see that Crowley moment, it was small, but like something, you know what I mean? It was something
yeah,
big.
I think I don't know. I don't know. I don't have any smart insights into what that look is. It did confuse me.
Mhm.
My hope was that it was more just Crawley. It's just the idea that he broke character, so that he was like, "Oh, I'm actually in on this now." Like,
Yeah, I'm
as opposed
human.
to just
Mhm.
being like, "Well, I do a thing, so I'm going to stick with it." The idea
Mm.
that he did connect in that moment.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's what it is, instead of maybe more judgment or like, oh, about time. But it's just okay. Like this is really happening.
Yeah. It looked like compassion. It looked
Yeah.
like nothing but concern and like, poor guy. He's talked to me for however long,
Mhm.
and this is how his story is unfolding, and it's about to get worse. Like, what the hell? Like, yeah. I feel bad for that, but I love that he broke character for that just brief frame. It was great.
So then next, Stephen goes to locker 43.
Mhm.
He gets Mark's stuff. He finds the scarab, and he talks to that's when Mark finally shows up in a reflective surface.
Yeah.
And he explains the whole, yeah, I'm the avatar of Khonshu, which means you're the avatar of Khonshu.
Mhm.
And yeah, we got to do this. So just give me the body. Let's stop fucking around. Like, we just got to accomplish this.
Yeah.
Which plays into a Harrow moment later, but for now it's Mark going on the thing of like, I just need to complete this mission, and then and I assume the mission is kill Amit before Harrow can wake her up, or like, do something like,
yeah,
because she's not dead, she's sleeping, and I guess Harrow's whole thing is I need to wake her up. And Khonshu, being the type of god he is like, I don't think he's doing it to save people. I think he's like, no, fuck that other god, kill her.
Yeah.
I
think I think you're right on that. I
Yeah.
definitely do.
And I think so that seems to be the mission Mark is on. He needs the scarab because that's what's going to lead him to Amit's tomb before Harrow gets there, and that's why it's so important that Harrow not get the scarab.
Yeah, and the assumption is that he destroys the tomb. That's
Yeah,
I mean, the
I'm
connecting
assuming he
it
actually
for
has
me.
to like destroy the body to make sure.
I'm assuming there's got to be some sort of ritualistic thing. It can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna burn it and then it's gonna be good, right? Like,
Yeah,
we're talking about Egyptian belief systems and the afterlife. It's truly going to be fascinating to see what happens here for sure.
basically, I read this as seeing the intensity in Mark's eyes made Stephen be like, oh, I'm never letting you take over. I'm not. I already saw the like aftermath of what you can do, but like actually interacting with that intensity, no thank you. I'm not giving up the body. And he basically says, I actually would rather turn myself in and have them pump me of so many pills that you leave altogether. That's kind of his take on the whole thing.
It's so sad because it's just like you could see his desperation at this point, that he's like, listen, I'm now connecting the dots. It's you that's been ruining my life, giving me those time gaps and all that kind of stuff, and I just want you gone. But you know what, the thing to me, and we had this a little bit of a talk about this on the last episode. Was he born Stephen or was he born Mark? You know what I mean? Because his passport is Mark. So I would assume that the US government won't be issuing out passports as easily as giving out jobs to, like a gift shop job at a museum. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's easier to get away with a fake identity with a gift shop job than a passport. So is he really Mark or is he really Stephen?
I think the best thing when dealing with the comics specifically and the show is to not try to pin that down.
Fair enough.
Because none of it is pinned down in the comics,
Right.
which would lead me to believe it would be weird if they tried to pin that down here.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Historically, it's Mark Spector, and he creates. This is not to do with DID. He creates, like how Batman has matches Malone. Like, he creates a Stephen Grant, he creates a Jake Lockley so that he can operate the way he needs to. Then as people started doing different iterations, it became DID. So if you're going by that, Mark is the prime, or like he
Mark is the origin person.
That's who, like, Mark's parents are the Specters. That is like, so it is Mark. He is Mark Spector. If you're going on that, the why I say it's better not to try and pin that down is because I don't much care for it, but what I think people like about it is all of that is constantly in question.
Yeah.
And so to try and take away that mystery is missing the point of what writers are trying to do with his character.
So there's a purposeful ambiguity to this in regards to, I don't know how that's going to fit into the MCU, man. I think we're seeing it, right? Like, you don't know who you can. There is enough evidence, as I said, when Harrow was like, I looked into it. You really are Stephen Grant. You really do work here. I looked at everything. So that's not that you have evidence to say that's not made up. And then you can see his passport that says Mark Spector. And I think there's multiple passports that say Mark Spector. It's not just like, oh, he's got a Stephen Grant passport in there. So there's evidence to be like, he can go around and get these passports using the name Mark Spector. Right.
But that's what I'm saying is it's better to just let that be a mystery that gives writers, artists room to get creative, as opposed to being like, well, what's the real answer?
Right. Because that was one thing I couldn't tell from this show, whether or not it was inconsistent, bad continuity writing, which has not been seen from the MCU terribly in a lot of the previous entries. But in this situation, you're right too, because it's like, hey, as we'll find out later, who Layla is. I'm like, that's a legal process too. Like, like,
Mhm.
so what's going? There's evidence on both sides. You're right. Like
Yes.
Harrow being like, whoa, you actually gave me your real name and the place you work.
Mhm.
That's stupid, but whatever. Like, and then Mark Spector, and then other people recognizing him as Mark, and it's wildly confusing. And if that's the point, then great.
Yes.
But to me, I'm like, once we step outside of the show, and let's say, for example, they do a Midnight Suns kind of run where he's interacting with like Ghost Rider or something, someone else. It's just like, how is it gonna be? How are we gonna be able to see that work out?
I think it's only confusing because we're so used in the MCU to there not being secret identities. But
Yes.
in the comics, they just interact with Moon Knight. So
Gotcha.
they just know Moon Knight.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that would make
So
sense.
it
to me.
wouldn't be
It would
that-
remove the Steven stuff out.
Well, I mean, I'm sure I haven't read those runs, but I'm sure some tension, some fun comes from the fact that Moon Knight has DID. But
Right.
as far as Ghost Rider, Blade, anyone in the Midnight Suns is concerned, they're dealing with Moon Knight.
Gotcha. That's a good way of thinking about it. That really helps me understand a lot better. Because to me, I'm just like, whenever Mark is in the picture, or like Moon Knight or Steven in future installments where there will be crossovers, how do we believe that? Do we look for visual evidences within this series to be like, oh, okay, when this color is on screen and he's on screen, then it's resembling reality, that kind of stuff, right? So that's a great way of putting it. They're just interacting with Moon Knight. Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, so then we get into that cool corridor scene where it's like the motion sensor lights, but because of the sound mix, it's more horror style, and Khonshu's coming for him. I like
Jump
the way it
style
looks.
scare.
I
That's
was
great.
I was a bit put off by the freeze frame just in the middle where he's like, ah, freezes. I thought there was something wrong with my TV or my internet, but
or
then,
the streaming, yeah.
but then I watched a bunch of people reacting to it, and I was like, okay, so that is a choice they made. That's fine. I don't really remember it by the end of the episode anyway, so it doesn't matter. But that forces him to run and get picked up by Layla, who says she tracked his phone. That's how she got there. And they go back to his place, and you learn a bunch of stuff. Well, one, she's married to Mark Spector. She thinks that Steven is another one of his identities, so that's playing on the comic history of when it wasn't the idea and it was just Mark makes up these different identities to
right, because she says drop the act,
Yeah, she's like,
accent.
"We've
Where's
lost
the
the-
accent coming from? Yeah,
we lost whoever's chasing you don't have to keep this up.
Right.
And that he actually is filed for divorce with her but didn't sign the papers.
Mhm.
And then there's the nice, well, maybe not nice, maybe it's just sad, like stuff where you realize like, oh, Steven would really get along with, I don't know if Layla would be like, I'm going to marry this guy, but they would really get along, and he would have someone he could talk to more if Layla was around, as they talk about unilaterals in Egyptian and even the French poet, that they both have the same French poet.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, like he doesn't have that connection with someone who could actually talk to him the way he thinks and everything. So yeah, it's kind of a sad thing there, but through this scene you're also seeing Mark really pushing like, hey, don't get her involved in this, please. Stop talking to her, you're gonna get her killed, all this stuff, which we later find out is because Mark already knows Khonshu is gonna try and use her as his avatar.
Yep.
So I guess he's thinking, just if I completely cut her out, then that's that.
The Spider-Man thing.
Yeah, it's I mean, this is different because it's very
Yes.
specifically like,
Yeah.
he already knows who she is to be, he already knows how to get at her, so it is actively trying to be like, no, like, please don't be a part of my life. I need to cut this off. But it is the same as far as we're concerned, logic of like, well, explain that to her then. You don't have to like keep her in the dark about that. But I understand more in this scenario why he's trying to give as little information as possible, because we see how resourceful she is and how she isn't a Mary Jane, and that's that she seems like she could be as capable as him at
Mm-hmm.
fighting, at figuring things out. Like, hey, I tracked your
Mm-hmm.
phone, I knew where you were, I can read all this information and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
I
mean-
understand that of being like, let's separate so you don't feel responsible for me,
Right.
and we go our separate ways.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if she was a part of like the missions that Mark ran at some point,
So-
right? With her knowledge, but maybe
They
not
change it
like
to that?
from. I'm sorry, go on.
They might change it to that, but in the comics,
see.
her character is called Marlene. There is no Layla character, but
Right.
if they are doing what I think they're doing in the original and in the Lemire run, there's a version of, and I'm glad they took him out of it, but there's a character named Bushman. Some people like to pronounce it Bushman to soften the blow, but it is a African character. I don't know if they say he's from Somalia specifically, but he is from an African nation. Maybe it's made up for Marvel or whatever. I don't remember, but he's got
Still not
the,
okay.
witch. He's got the witch. No, I'm not. I wasn't
Yeah.
trying to give them a pass.
No passes whatsoever. I'm doubling down on your lack of pass.
Yeah, he's got the like witch doctor look and everything, and
Ooh,
he
like that voodoo vibe.
They don't
like
get into that, but
okay.
That's how it reads. Like that.
I see.
You're supposed to be scared of him that way instead of just his actions.
I don't like it.
So this character hires Mark, and this is how Mark becomes involved with Khonshu, is that this character hires Mark to, raid a dig that's happening
Right.
at Khonshu's temple, and he kills everyone in Marlene's group, including her dad, except for Marlene, and that's then Mark and Marlene become connected. But also during that time, Mark tries to fight back, and Bushman basically leaves him for dead, or does kill him. I don't know if there's like they kind of jump in the Lemire run, so I don't know how it's actually done, but basically Khonshu saves his life, and that's how he becomes the thing. But even in that, Khonshu is aware of Marlene as well, so I can see how this Layla character, and also in that Marlene is white, so I guess that's why they've changed it, so that they can have an actual Egyptian character in this show about Egypt.
About Egypt, who would have thought?
So I'm fine with the change in that sense, but that's what I think it is. I think they're trying to do the Marlene storyline in that way.
Gotcha.
Of which isn't to say she's not capable, but I don't think she's a mercenary.
Right, but that she's might be involved in the mission somehow, like she was the scientist of the mission, or I don't know, like something like that. But it seems like she's very, very capable, like a secret agent type of knowledge. Even the idea of like, what, I tracked your phone, like I wouldn't know how to track someone's phone. You know what? I don't know how to do that.
So I don't think she's an archaeologist like she is in the comics. I think she is.
There's more involved.
There's more to her.
Cool.
I'm assuming they don't want her to be a full-on mercenary that would work with Bushman. Maybe she was just also at the dig trying to get information, and then the violence happened. But we'll find out, or we won't. I don't know. But that's my knowledge from the Lemire run, is that all of this still lines up until they go a different way. And I'm not saying I would be mad about that. I'm just saying right now it seems to line up with, she seems to be the Marlene character.
Yeah, because at this point in the Stevens apartment, and they're going through the things, they're having the dialogue, they're learning all these things about each other. Mark confirms her identity, right? And we can trust that. We can trust, like, yeah, she's not a double agent. She's not trying to trick him. She is legitimately someone important in Mark's life, and legitimately a wife, a married spouse. So it's just like, we can trust this. We can trust her, and like hanging on to what she's saying, but is really, really tricky when she's so frustrated with him, right? Like months of text and calls, nothing returned. Yeah, that's rough.
One thing I did notice was also she confirms, like, oh, you don't talk to your mom, so because when he's like, oh yeah, that's from my mom, and she's like,
yes,
or sorry, this is my mom, / like, so you talk to her now. But also, I guess what I just said is completely thrown out the window, because obviously she was on the mission with Mark to get that scarab, because she says when she finds the scarab in the bag, oh, so you just want to do a solo thing, because like we fought so hard for this and now you're trying to keep it from me. And the hurt she feels that way, not as a significant. I mean, as a significant other for sure, but also
Mhm.
as someone who worked just as hard to get that scarab.
Yep.
Presumably
Yep. Yeah, that's rough.
a
That's
partner
rough.
in
Yep.
crime, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's like it hurts two ways.
Yeah. It's glad you pointed that out. But yeah, it's gonna be a rough go for her character, trying to figure out what's going on right now. Because I don't think she's familiar with the DID aspect of
She
any of
can't
this.
be.
She's just familiar with the fact that Mark can turn into Moon Knight. She's very
Right,
aware.
she saw him do it.
Yeah.
And then another thing from the Lemire run, the two officers in quotation marks who come are Billy and Bobby.
Mhm.
So in the comic run, they're always, whenever you see them, that's always a sign that you know that like he's back in the hospital.
Oh, I see.
And so they're orderlies at the hospital. It's two men, but that's fine. You can switch it up.
Mhm.
But yeah, Billy and Bobby are always there, and so like it'll always break whatever illusion is happening, and you'll be like, oh fuck, he's back there. He's gonna get like electroshock therapy now, or he's gonna get this. So I like the way they use that there, that you think something's happening, and then this time it's just, oh, you can see the Amit tattoo, and it drains you of whatever you think is happening. You're just kind of like, oh no. But I mean, the way they're operating, you kind of already know that they're not actually operating like people think police should. To be honest, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah,
Keywords people think police should.
Yeah,
Not how they are.
They're just bursting in. They're not showing any like
Yeah.
warrant to burst in. They
Mhm.
just take him,
Mhm.
and he's like, "Well, aren't we going to the station?" And he does the nice shot of adjusting the mirror and being like, "Well,
Mhm.
why did you think that?" So you can see his tattoo. I liked all of that, but I also like that it's an added thing of like, oh, that's Billy and Bobby, like just a
Mhm.
constant. If you're reading the comics, you kind of get the beats of like, oh shit, they're back, because they just keep coming. No matter what he does to them, they're just always back, and usually get one up on him. Like,
That's
he-
rough.
He doesn't usually outsmart them or beat them up. They just get him. So I liked the use of that, and even if it just stays like that, I thought that was a very smart use considering what I
Mhm.
know from the comics.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah,
and
because
then
I
you
would
kinda-
not be comfortable seeing them as orderlies that are abusing someone with the ID in any regard. That
No.
would be so
and it is
uncomfortable.
definitely abuse. It is not
Yep.
like, oh, this is what's good for you. It is definitely them
Mm.
abusing power. in
Yeah,
the comics.
that makes. Yeah, I'm glad. Not that changing them to cops is any better, but I'm glad that they're not outright abusing people with mental illness.
I think the idea is you're just constantly supposed to know, like Billy
Yep.
and Bobby are terrible. They're not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, cops is a fitting avatar for that. For us, anyways.
Yeah. So this is where you kind of see the commune that Harrow has put together.
Mhm.
I like that moment where he's talking to Mark in the mirror, and he's like, you understand me? And he's like, I do. I hear you, Stephen Grant from the gift shop. And I'm like, oh, I did not see that. Obviously I thought he might just, open the door, but the voice first, I was like, that was effective. I liked
Mhm.
that decision. And then just letting him out onto the ground again, just kind of taking the wind from his wings. And like, all of that is good. I could have done without the awkward Mandarin, but I like the concept anyway, that we all try to learn 3 different languages,
Mhm.
and we try to teach each other stuff,
Mhm.
which does, I feel like, gain you more loyalty from followers than if
Yes.
if it was just a one-way street.
That being able to rely on a secret language to be able to just fall back on it just provides a different level of communication and security. It's crazy, right? So when they
But
did that, I'm
yeah.
like, I get what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's wildly cool. And they're building up terrorists. I mean, if you
Mhm.
think about terrorists,
Oh yeah.
multiple languages, blind debate, they're building it up. There's no doubt about that.
The languages for sure, but also the idea that they're teaching, like, you don't go into it being like, and Harrow is going to teach us the way. It's that, oh, we all come in with different strengths and we're all teaching each other stuff.
Yeah.
So I can teach Harrow something, he teaches me something, which makes you feel way more part of the process than if it were just just the languages by themselves.
Yeah.
And it feels more holistic that way.
Yeah. Which, by the way, just quick sidebar. I would love a movie that represents communes in a good light as opposed to a cultish vibe every single time. Because like commune living sounds cool, and I want that to be explored positively on screen as opposed to like, oh, this is a cult that's willing to take down stuff for the first time. Like, God, I
Mhm.
like the idea of communes. It's a cool idea. Just give me some positive reinforcement of that it works instead of the beach.
Oof.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
I was just thinking of even Wonderlust. Like even in a comedy, they don't really
Mhm.
make it seem that appealing.
No, Wanderlust is terrible for
Yeah.
that. They make it seem like everything that's looking at the idea of commune living is like, oh, they're a cult that's ends up like wild, wild country or whatever. But like
The only show that I can think of that gives it even a bit of a positive
Mhm.
twist is Mixed Dish, which is the
Mm.
Blackish spinoff and
Yep.
stars Mark Paul Gosselaar, who is Zach Morris,
Mhm.
and his family lived on a commune, and then I don't remember the circumstances for leaving, but
Mhm.
basically the kids don't feel like they missed out on anything from living on a commune, and they actually find some of the practices when you integrate into mainstream society stupid. They're like, oh, why would we do this, or why would we? But anyway, so I that's one show that I think doesn't
Mm.
try to just make communes the butt of the joke.
I mean, I get it. I get why, but I'd like it positively explored. But that was a sidebar.
Yeah,
But yes, they're in the commune living. They've got everything I can dream of. They got their own solar, their own electric 24-hour like hydroponics farms to grow their own foods and all that kind of stuff. They're teaching each other stuff. They love each other. It's a great idea. It's cool. I like it.
and then they kill kids, but
And then they kill kids.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, this is why we can't explore this positively on screen because we kill kids. Great. Damn it.
So Harrow tries to sell
Mhm.
Stephen and Mark, I believe. At first, I didn't read it that way, but rewatching it, I can see that he's trying to sell both of them on the
Mhm.
idea that this is the way to live. This is you're the god you follow is too late. It is kind of the Avengers idea, right? Like
Yes.
we can't protect, but we avenge, right? We're the
Mhm.
Avengers.
Mhm.
And so he's saying, like, why not just be proactive about this?
Mhm.
And
Bring us to Civil War arguments again, right?
well, this time it's pretty clear cut. Like,
yeah,
no,
clear cut. Yeah.
no, you're gonna kill a kid because they might do something 30 years later. And he's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, sometimes you just got to cut off the limb before the disease spreads.
And that's so wild to me because I'm like, that's a terrible analogy. In that analogy, the arm has to be damaged first. There's no damage done. Like that's the problem with the analogy. I'm like, you're
I
justifying
mean, they
murdering
can't
kids.
they can't give him an analogy that, like, I mean, I don't think there is one, but also they couldn't give him one where you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
You're absolutely right about that. There's probably no analogy that would actually make sense to people that aren't looking to believe in that.
Yes, exactly. And I think the important information here is he was actually the Fist of Khonshu first. He was Khonshu's-
Absolutely.
not the
Mhm.
first one. I shouldn't say that, but he
One
has been,
the previous.
which makes it interesting throughout the sequence because he's constantly like, "Oh, did he just say to kill me? Oh, did he just say this?" And Steven's
Mhm.
like, "Wait, can you hear him or no?"
Yeah, and then like with the environmental stuff, he's saying like, relax. That's all he can do,
Yeah.
unless you let him, kind of deal. Let's go
Well,
for
no,
a
he's
walk.
saying unless you help him. not
Yes,
let it. It's
yeah.
like, you have to. That's the whole thing.
You have to
act
engage.
out his
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
You have to do what he wants you to. And I'm like, all right, as a villain right now, he's doing some really cool things. He's really doing some things by knowing the character, knowing the strengths, knowing everything, and just like talking him through. And because at a point, it's like, yeah, I can trust a lot of what you're saying because a lot of what you're saying is grounded in what I'm experiencing right now and what I'm seeing, but I don't trust your motives.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job
Mm.
of getting to the point of it, which is
Absolutely.
you're trying to end a war before it starts.
Mhm.
If we're talking about the Civil War, Age of Ultron talk,
Mhm.
and I'm not down with that.
10
because
rings.
that puts children at risk and
Mhm.
innocent people. You're killing it. He doesn't even put it as it's just kids. He's saying you're killing innocent
Mhm.
people. They haven't done anything wrong yet.
Yeah.
Um,
And this is the most important thing to to put out there. This is a small group of people or one person deciding morality, and that's the problem, right? It's not unanimous. It's not like, yeah, you know what, this person needs to be put in jail. This society thought that based on this. It's just one person based on these set of morals and values that is just like, we need to do this, and I feel the right to do it, and we're gonna kill whoever that comes across, even little old ladies that, you know, are just trying to love you and all, and you kill them in the street because they might be bad. It's rough. It's a rough time.
And he also says something that, again, for me, tied into the comics, which is, you know, there's always one more mission. He's never going to be done with you. And
Yes.
that's what I was trying to link up earlier when
Mhm.
Mark is in this thinking like, I just got to do this and then be done. And
Mm.
I don't know if he truly believes that, because it seems like by the end of the episode he doesn't believe it. I think he realizes, I just have to keep doing this so he doesn't move on to Layla.
Mhm.
But he might try to tell himself, yeah, like, I just do this one last thing and he'll get off my back. And
Mhm.
Harrow, who was a former Fist of Khonshu, knows like, nah, that's not how it works. There's always
Mhm.
gonna be something. And I remember that was the one constant thing throughout the comics that I kind of found boring, was like, yeah, he just keeps asking for stuff, and you, like an idiot, keep thinking that's the last time.
Mm.
I
I mean,
I'm glad it's called out here in
Yes.
the show just calls it out right away,
Mhm.
so that you don't have to be like, and it gives, that's what I like about the show, is that it improves on stuff I'm not that happy about in the comics, which is,
Mhm.
I can actually see this as, well, he's always going to do this because he doesn't want his wife to have to go through this. So
Yep.
he can tell himself whatever to get through it. But I
Mhm.
don't look at it as like, well, do you really believe this is the last mission? No, he doesn't actually have to believe it. He can just tell himself that to feel better about the fact that he's like, I just have to do this.
Mhm. Yeah, because basically Khonshu's got the best blackmail right now. Like,
Mhm.
he's never gonna have to, as long as Mark still thinks like, yeah, Layla is the next target for Khonshu, then it's always gonna be a problem. Now, my question to you is this: during that whole interaction where he reveals that Khonshu, he was the previous Fist of Khonshu and all that kind of stuff, I was surprised that Stephen never at any point asked, like, well, how did you get rid of him? You know, like, how did that transfer? Like, how did he move on from you? Like, all that. It's weird that he wouldn't.
Well, I don't
but
think that would be a question Stephen would ask.
Oh, fair enough. But
Because Stephen, I don't think, is sold on the fact that he is a part of it.
that's true too.
I think he thinks like, yeah, this is, it's just something I could take some pills and get rid of.
I'm still sleepwalking. This is still
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
If it were Mark, maybe he would be like,
Mm,
he would get engaged in that a bit more. But that's why I said
that's
this
true.
does feel like it's a conversation with Stephen and Mark.
Gotcha.
It's just
Gotcha.
Mark's not in control right now.
Mm.
But I don't think Stephen would have a question like that, because
Mm.
to him, and I think even you felt like that last episode, that it was like, oh no, it's just Mark that has these, but it is the body that has these powers. It's
Yes.
just Stephen doesn't engage with it because he's not thinking about it.
He's
Like,
not
it's
aware.
a thing.
Yeah. He's not fully
Um,
aware of it. Yeah.
Which does lead us into the next sequence, which is Layla showing up with the scarab and just trusting that Stephen will. I think
Suit
she
up.
still thinks it's Mark. I think
Yes.
she's like, this will force him, until she even said, like, she breaks down, like when he breaks down, and then
Mhm.
she gets down, makes eye contact with him, and calls him Stephen. I think that's her accepting, okay, I'm dealing with Stephen then. And she's like, we'll figure something else out then. Like, that's when she
Mhm.
stops pushing and being like, all right, we'll figure something out. And that's what I like about Layla's character. She just seems so resourceful. And
Yeah.
at no point is she the damsel in distress. I think I like that they avoid that.
Mhm.
She clearly makes her own decisions. She's fine with that.
Mhm.
And she helps during the Jackal fight with the bottle idea, and so you can see the outline of him, so that she can actually be a part of it instead of just being like, okay, Stephen, go for it.
Mhm.
All of that I like, but yeah, she basically thinks she can just force Mark to drop the act, or even if Mark is having an issue, maybe this will jog it. And that,
Yeah.
I mean, it does ultimately work, but not the way she thought it would, because basically
Mhm.
Stephen gets thrown out the window and he becomes Mr. Knight as opposed to Moon Knight. So the interesting thing about that is, I like the show because it gave me a bit more clarity, but what I understand from the comics, and I read the run where Mr. Knight was introduced. I didn't know that I was doing that, because
Mhm.
it kind of just is in that run. Like there's
Mhm.
no like, and this is what I do for the. It was literally like, oh, he just showed up,
Mhm.
and then I read later, oh, that is the first time he showed up. Interesting. But in both runs, Mr. Knight is that I read, one being I don't like using the author's name because he's a basically
He's a
he's
bad
sexual.
person.
Yeah, this
He's a
sexual.
bad person.
Yes. But then there's the Lemire run, which is later,
Mhm.
like 2 years later or something like that, and he's in it, but he is very clearly the detective. He's the
Mm.
person that police will work with. So he's not like he's not comical at all. He can
Mhm.
fight, he can do all that, but it's more like to avoid the whole, well, we don't want Moon Knight on the same way they'd be like, we don't want Batman on the crime scene. They will let Mr. Knight be on the crime scene.
So
and
he's a less
investigate.
threatening version and more
Yes,
accepted.
he
He's
looks more like a
I
he's
see.
he's seen as a concerned citizen. He's not seen as a vigilante.
I see.
Why you would let him tamper with a crime scene, I don't know, but I just go
Yeah.
with it. I'll just that's whatever. It's a comic book. I'll just go with it. But that is
Yeah.
the reasoning for the difference between Moon Knight and Mr. Knight.
Interesting.
Mr. That's not how it's used here, obviously. I think what
Yep.
they're doing here is he doesn't have the concept of what Moon Knight is wrapped up in. So when he hears summon the suit, he's just like, well, okay, here's a suit. And now you can
Right.
see like how Steven accesses Khonshu powers, and you can see how Mark accesses
Mhm.
Khonshu. I think that's what they're doing here.
Yeah.
It's fine. It doesn't. I know people are bothered by that, but I'm just kinda
Really?
like whatever. Well,
I just,
because it's you're not using Mr. Knight the way Mr. Knight is used.
that's fair. The way I see Mr. Knight right now is and is the idea of like, okay, this is Steven's greatest insecurity. He's not attractive. He's not suave. He's not this. He's not this. He's not this. He's not powerful. Mr. Knight is all those things, right? I mean, he's sharp. That suit jacket is awesome. That embroidery, I love it so much. And then
the only reason I would push back on it is like, sure, he looks good, but he's still not like he's got the strength, obviously, because we talked about it, that's what. But he doesn't have. It didn't make him not Steven.
right, and that's okay because my point is his dream. My assumption is based on his experiences, and this is me projecting a little bit. But my assumption is that put on the suit is a way of hiding that insecurity of that kind of stuff. So now I'm presenting to the world this polished suit, this polished kind of thing, and that is also powerful.
Again,
and,
my pushback is that one, Mark says we look like crazy Colonel Sanders, and
yes,
onlookers are like, oh, he's just a crazy drunk. No
Yep.
one was like, oh, like he doesn't
Mhm.
present as more confident, is what I'm saying. Like he didn't mask what it just actually highlighted all
Right.
the like weird stuff about him.
I guess so. Yeah, but I
That's
guess
what I'm
it's
saying, like,
his
it's just-
avatar of what that
He just
would
was
look
like,
like
oh, put on a
versus-
suit. I don't know why
Yeah.
the mask. I mean, that kind of throws away like it undercuts why the mask is there. But
right. But I assume that once he summons anything, that the mask has to be a part of it. That's
well,
my
this-
assumption.
What I guess what I'm saying is it's a comic book thing. Everyone knows
Mhm.
what. If you've read the comics, you know that okay, they're doing Mr. Knight, so that's the look
Mhm.
of Mr. Knight.
Mhm.
And what I like about this phase 4 is they are just doing comic accurate suits.
Mhm.
So it's not like they were like, oh, he just has the suit, but not the mask,
Mhm.
because that would be silly.
That'd be
like that they're just-
stupid. I would hate that.
No, what I'm saying is that they
Yeah.
that they weren't scared of putting the mask on because
Yeah.
they think that's what I'm
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah.
I think they just went with it, so I just have to accept
Mm.
this is how they got to Mr. Knight. Because
Do you
it
like this
doesn't-
better?
I don't really think they have room for him to be the concerned citizen that cops let work the crime scenes.
True.
So sure, like if you really wanted to have the Mr. Knight look, then sure, like let's do that. And if it helps people differentiate as to who's into control,
Mhm.
that's fine. It's I don't know. I think the Mr. Knight, Moon Knight stuff in the comics always gets a bit too confusing for me anyway. So at least this is clean cut.
Yeah, because it feels weird because it's like layering DID on top of DID, which has already been a thing, right? We put Khonshu in a DID person.
I think in the
And-
comics it's
Mhm.
that. I think in the show they've done a clean just well, this alter, this is how they envisioned what the suit is.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me. That's less of like, oh, and he's his own identity now. It's
Yeah.
more just like, okay, when Mark does it, he knows what he's trying to summon.
Mm.
Stephen didn't know what he was trying to summon, so he just put the suit together.
There's also nothing that says in future episodes and in future installments of whatever that he can't be helping out with the police too, or whatever it might be, right? This is the origin story. We're just learning about it. So there's no point in saying, because if this is the story that Mark and Steven are learning to get along and understand their DID and how to work with it and all that kind of stuff, and that Steven at some point is like, cool, I can pull up the suit right now, but I don't need to have Mark involved because Mark kills people and I don't need that right now. That to me is like, all right, I could live with that, of how Mr. Knight becomes that person that you're talking about. But for someone that's not truly attached to the Moon Knight comic run, I don't think I have any grounds to say that, but I think it's cool. I think it's cool that they're moving in that direction.
And so
Potentially.
then, basically we see that it's messy because it's Steven. And Mark's like, can we like stop this now? Just let me take over. You're hurting. You're actually going to get people hurt. Like more people will be hurt if you keep doing what you're doing. So he lets Mark take over, and right away Mark has the smart idea of, let me take him away from the like public area.
Yep.
Kills the Jackal, and I guess before their interaction, you see that Harrow picks up the Scarab, or somebody picks up the Scarab, and Harrow kills that person. You know, the whole "I wish you could be alive to see the world we're building."
Yep.
Takes the Scarab, gone. And Layla witnesses that and is like, I'm out of here. Goodbye. And so then we get the showdown between Mark and Steven, where Mark's like, wow, okay. Usually there's a wall between us, but clearly now whoever is in control has a lot of power, that you were able to keep me like locked away for that long. You kind of go like, oh shit. So he's like, I mean, I think we always knew he's not going to go back and let Steven do his thing.
No,
but he's very clear, like, oh no, like this, we're not doing this. Like I have to do this. He's coming for Layla. I'm not letting you take over. And in this sense, maybe he's like, I'm certainly not even entertaining the idea of you coming back out until I'm finished this task for Khonshu. And Steven's like, no, we're like, we're gonna bring her back. And then you see Mark violently smash the reflective surface and try to shut Steven out completely. Then Khonshu shows up, and you learn what we know from the comics and what we can always would have assumed, which is he's like, hey, you said he wasn't going to be a problem, and he is a problem, which clearly, like, he found him as Mark, gave him the powers, and then probably was like, hold on, what's this with the Steven stuff?
You didn't tell me about this diagnosis. What's going on?
But
he stays, though. He stays. And that's the interesting thing. He was able to move on from Harrow and then chooses to stay with Mark, even though there's this issue. That's a very interesting thing to me. Right?
I mean, so it's in the comics as well, and it's stated in this show. Do you think he's with you because you're broken, or do you think you broke because he's with you? Well, that was the question Harrow asked, but I think the answer is he's with you because you're broken. I'm putting that in quotation marks. That's not
that's not how we feel.
I think
it's
Steven even says, I'm not broken, I just need help, which is again the show being very sensitive. But as in terms of trying to put someone down, I'm just using that language of he is there because he feels he can manipulate the situation better than obviously with Harrow, who seems way more strong-minded about what he wants.
Gotcha. And more control.
So
over the process,
I don't think this was like, hey, I still see the virtue of it. I think he's like, perfect. So you're dealing with some other stuff here. I will be able to do what I need to do.
So what you're saying is that Khonshu has purposely chosen Mark / Steven because he can take advantage of the situation.
He's definitely chosen Mark.
Gotcha.
I don't think he's chosen Steven.
No, he does not like Steven.
Steven comes with it, obviously. But it's very clear from the first time you hear Khonshu's voice, he does not want to deal with Steven.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah,
he's like the weak one, like, the vermin. He calls him like.
We also see he's not that effective when he.
Yeah, he just scares him. He's just basically watching over him to be like, oh, I'm gonna watch what this dummy is gonna do.
Well,
And
because I think the idea is like, oh well, Mark won't be able to fully, and again, spoilers for the Lemire run, but the whole point is it works in Khonshu's favor that they're at odds, Mark
Gotcha.
and Steven, until the end of that run where Mark is like, I'm gonna work with all of the alters and we will defeat Khonshu. And it's still at the end of it like, well, we don't even really know if this actually happened, but it still feels like a win for me that
Gotcha.
I worked with all of my alters and we accomplished something. So
Yep.
that's still in play in the show, and that's how I see it, is that it works in Khonshu's favor that Mark is at odds with Steven.
Gotcha.
So he needs Steven in that sense, not because he thinks Steven will help him accomplish what he wants to accomplish, which is being odd, but it helps him keep his avatar in check.
That's rough.
Yeah.
That's rough to know. Damn it. And like, and which is why I like when Haro was like, yeah, he's like a child and he's like throwing temper tantrums and doing all this kind of stuff because he's like the god that none of the other gods liked or something. Like it, the way he described Khonshu is like, yeah, okay, now I can see this god being such a jerk about taking advantage of someone with mental illness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to,
it's terrible.
Yeah, it's awful.
In the comics and clearly in the show, you're not ever supposed to like Khonshu. That's not a thing. Like you're not.
I'm glad.
You're not. It's never written like,
okay,
oh, okay, I'm glad he's with Khonshu. You're constantly wanting him to get away from that.
Gotcha. Oh man, that's rough. That is rough. I don't know if that's supposed to be their analogy for like substance abuse and DID, but like it's such tricky material to like go through. It's so tricky because I'm like, what's real to critique? What's not? What are we being made to believe is this, and what are we actually supposed to believe, and how much of DID are we supposed to consider in this? Right? It's not like Split where it's like, okay, we're really doing a deep dive into DID and then also telling a story, but this is just there's a story about a guy with
also
DID.
With Split, what I think is good is that they were like, there is DID and then there's what is happening to James McAvoy's character. So that makes it easier to unpack than
absolutely
this, which hasn't said what's happening with Mark is different than DID. It just looks like DID.
Yeah,
that's what I thought was good about Split and Glass, was that you don't have to be like, well, that could, or they're misrepresenting the idea, because it's made very clear that this is something different. While also acknowledging tenets of speaking about the idea and stuff. But yeah, so anyway, the end of this is I like it when he's like, we gotta go, and he's like, where are we going? And Khonshu's like, where the hell do you think we're going? It's Egypt. And something I heard on the Ringer verse, I don't remember what it's called, Mallory Rubin, Joanna Robinson, they were talking about this interview that the director and kind of like overall, not the director of this episode, but the kind of like main director and executive producer Mohammed Diab said was he was so happy that they actually put the pyramids where you would see them in Egypt today and not back like in even the 90s. Like it's like, no, like there's a KFC across from the pyramids, so like stop trying to put it just out somewhere in the desolate desert. Like he was happy that it was like Mark could see the pyramids from his hotel room. Like it felt like a better display of what that part of Egypt looks like today.
And that's what I've heard oftentimes people complain when like Egypt is used, it's only for the Sphinx, it's only for this, and it's so misrepresentative about how far people live away from the pyramids or something like that, that they're like, it's kind of like how in Colorado you can open up your thing and then see like the mountain, and that's like actually happening. Like apparently in Egypt, like when people take pictures and post them to Instagram, it's like, wow, yeah, okay, that is just their apartment view, you know, like the it's nice to see that. It truly, really is. Instead of being like, oh, I'm out in a friggin' desert with a tent, opening up, and then, oh, I'm in the middle of, in front of the pyramids. Like, that's just, I don't like that.
But yeah, so that's where they also mentioned that Mohammed Diab creator said there's kind of like duology. So the first 2 episodes were the London duology. The next 2 episodes we can assume are the Egypt duology. Also explains to me why you would put them out not one at a time, but whatever. It's like they. So I think we've made another shift.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see what happens in
Mhm.
this. What he's not the creator, Jeremy Slater is, but it does seem like Mohammed Diab kind of took over unofficially. What Mohammed Diab sees as the second act of the show now.
Yeah, because we're clearly in the second act.
Yeah.
So does that mean it is a 6-episode run, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so right, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what a great first act. It was really good.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I have to say about this episode.
We'll be back next week for more.
We will be. I hope everyone enjoyed this, and I hope people are just this. I mean, I don't really care if you like the show or not. Hopefully you enjoy us.
I care.
Unpacking.
I care.
This show, not Moon Knight. You could not like it and still hear the
yeah. Listen to like our show.
Yeah.
Have different feelings about other shows.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, thank you very much. Different opinions, but also I hope you like shows like Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, because we are a part of the That Shelf Podcast Network. They are a part of the That Shelf Podcast Network, and it's a great time. So head on over to thatshelf.com. You'll find those shows, our show, more shows. It's a good time. And if you'd like to hear older episodes of our show, please go to tdferything.com/spoiledrotten. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. Our Twitter is @tdfspoiled. And we're on all sorts of things: Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. So if you find that we're not on whatever kind of podcast listening device you use, just contact us through email and Twitter.
Yeah, we'll send you the transcripts.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you.
We
for
will not
asking
do
for
that.
The transcript.
We will not be doing that.
Well, you can pay for us to send the transcript.
Yes.
But yeah, if we're not, we can try and fix that. Otherwise, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends on all the things I listed. If we're there. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.